I was just a freelance coder trying to survive the night until a group of radical bikers forced me to carry the evidence of their organized scheme. Now, I'm being hunted by an invisible enemy, and the only way to stay alive is to burn their entire world to the ground. The rain was turning the asphalt of the roadside diner into a slick, obsidian mirror. I sat in my wheelchair near the entrance, shielding my laptop from the drizzle, just trying to finish a freelance coding gig before the battery died. I was used to the stairs. After the accident 3 years ago, I had become an expert at being invisible, a ghost in the machine, someone people looked through or looked away from. But that night, the silence of the parking lot was shattered by the rhythmic, guttural roar of a dozen engines. They didn't just pull in, they invaded. 12 bikes, sleek and aggressive, flanked by men in heavy leather jackets adorned with patches that looked more like warnings than insignias. They parked in a jagged crescent, cutting off the main exit of the lot. I kept my head down, hoping if I didn't acknowledge them, they wouldn't acknowledge me. My heart, however, began that familiar frantic drumming against my ribs. I knew the type. Not all bikers are troublemakers, but these men carried the kind of arrogance that only comes from knowing they run the local territory. One of them, a mountain of a man with a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw, stepped off his bike. He didn't go toward the diner. He walked straight toward me. His boots crunched against the gravel, a sound like grinding teeth. I tried to shift my chair to angle away, but the front wheels hit a rut. I was trapped. "Well, well," the man sneered, his voice a low rasp. "What have we here? A broken toy sitting in the middle of our meeting spot." His friends, who had dismounted, began to circle. They laughed, a hollow, cruel sound that didn't reach their eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the equipment strapped to my chair. The laptop, the expensive noise-canceling headphones, the high-end external hard drive. "I'm just leaving," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I reached for the joystick on my chair. The man stepped in front of me, his heavy boot pinning my footrest to the ground. "Who said you were leaving? You're in our space, cripple. You're occupying territory that belongs to the group." The insults that followed weren't just about my disability. They were laced with racial vitriol, the kind of language that drags you back to the darkest parts of human history. They spat on the pavement near my wheels. One of them grabbed my laptop from my lap, tossing it into the air and catching it like a ball. I felt a surge of helpless, suffocating rage, but I knew better than to fight. If I lashed out, they would bury me here, and the police report would probably just say, "I fell into the road." "What are you going to do about it?" the scar-faced man taunted, leaning down until his sweat-slicked face was inches from mine. "Cry? Call your mama? You think you're worth anything in this world sitting in that pile of scrap metal?" He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were cold. Dead things. "We've got a little operation running through this county, and we don't like witnesses who look like they're recording us. Maybe we should check what's on this little computer of yours. Maybe we should see if you're some kind of snitch working for the Service of Internal Security." My breath hitched. They were accusing me of monitoring them, of being a plant. They weren't just bullies, they were paranoid. And paranoia in a group like this was a death sentence. "I'm just a programmer," I managed to choke out. "I don't know anything about your business." "Everyone knows something," another biker shouted, pulling out a heavy metallic object from his waistband. Not a gun, but a brutal-looking chain wrapped in black tape. He began swinging it, the metal whistling as it cut through the damp air, missing my ear by inches. The circle tightened. The scar-faced man reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small, sealed bag containing a mysterious white substance. Packets with a substance I had never seen before in my life. He shoved it into my jacket pocket with such force that it bruised my chest. "Now you're not just a witness," he hissed, his face twisted into a demonic grin. "Now you're an accomplice. If the authorities show up, you're the one holding the evidence of our organized scheme. You want to call for help? Go ahead. But the moment you dial, we make sure that charge sticks. You'll be looking at an attempt to frame you with a serious criminal indictment. They'll put you away for decades, and you'll die in a cage." I felt the weight of the packets in my pocket, a cold, sickening anchor. They were setting me up. If I did nothing, they'd likely beat me into a coma. If I called the police, they'd hand me over for a massive crime I hadn't committed, ensuring I'd never see the light of day again. I stared at the scar-faced man, his arrogance absolute. He pulled out his own phone, tapped a button, and held it up to my face. "I'm calling the local sheriff right now," he lied, his thumb hovering over the screen. "You want to see what happens when a cripple starts talking to the law?" He dialed a number, put it on speaker, and waited. My vision blurred. I had nowhere to run, no way to hide, and no one to turn to. I was a sitting duck in a trap that had been snapped shut before I even realized it was there. The phone began to ring, and the man looked at me, waiting for the terror to consume me. Then the call was picked up. A voice on the other end answered, but it wasn't the local sheriff. It was a cold, precise, and dangerously calm woman's voice. "I see you, Marcus, and I suggest you put the phone down, or you won't live to see the sun rise tomorrow." The bikers froze, their smug grins vanishing instantly as if they'd been struck by lightning. Marcus went pale, his hand trembling as he stared at his own phone screen. Everything was about to change. The silence that followed the woman's voice was absolute, heavier than the rain that still slicked the pavement. The roar of the engines, the taunts, the thud of the chain, it all evaporated, replaced by a sudden, chilling stillness. Marcus, the man who had been towering over me with the arrogance of a king, looked at his phone as if it were a venomous snake that had just bitten him. "Who the hell is this?" he stammered, though his voice lacked any of its previous bravado. He reached out to tap the screen to hang up, but his finger hovered, frozen in midair. "Don't," the voice on the other end commanded. It was sharp, surgical, and radiated an authority that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "If you disconnect, the location of your warehouse in the industrial district is sent to the Internal Security Service within 3 seconds. They have the tactical team already warming up the engines. Do you really want to force their hand, Marcus?" Marcus turned to look at his cohorts. They were no longer posturing. They were scanning the darkness of the surrounding woods, their hands shifting nervously to their belts. They were used to intimidation, to running the streets and bullying anyone smaller than them, but they weren't used to being hunted. This wasn't a local dispute anymore. This was a high-level tactical standoff, and they knew it. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus tried to growl, though it came out as a weak, trembling wheeze. "You think you can rattle us with a burner phone? We don't fear the law, and we certainly don't fear a voice." "I am not the law, Marcus," the woman replied, her tone shifting from dangerous to bored. "The law is slow. The law is cumbersome. I am an intervention, and right now, you are holding the man who has spent the last 3 years documenting your every move. You think he's just a guy in a chair. You think his laptop is just for freelance code." My heart hammered against my ribs. Documenting them. I didn't even know who they were 5 minutes ago. I looked down at my laptop, which Marcus had tossed onto the passenger seat of his bike earlier. What had they found? Or rather, what did they think they had found? "Let him go," the woman continued. "Leave the equipment, and if you're still within the city limits by sunrise, you will find that your organized scheme will be dismantled piece by piece. You'll be facing an indictment for serious crimes that will guarantee you an enormous term behind bars. We have enough to bury you, and we've been waiting for a reason to stop playing nice." Marcus looked at me. His eyes weren't filled with hatred anymore. They were filled with the realization that he had stepped into a trap he didn't even know existed. He reached into my pocket, snatched the packets of the prohibited substance he had shoved there moments before, and crumpled them into a ball. He looked like he wanted to kill me, but the voice on the phone acted like a leash he couldn't break. "This isn't over," he hissed at me, his breath hitching. "You're a dead man walking, whoever you're working for." "He's not working for anyone," the voice said. "He's just an innocent man you decided to harass. Now walk away." The bikers scrambled. There was no dignity in their retreat. They fumbled for their keys, tripped over their own boots, and threw themselves onto their bikes. Within seconds, the parking lot was filled with the chaotic, desperate roar of engines firing up at once. They peeled out of the diner lot, gravel spraying everywhere, leaving me alone in the rain once more. I sat there, frozen, the adrenaline beginning to crash. The phone was still lying on the damp asphalt where Marcus had dropped it in his haste to leave. I leaned over, my chair wobbling on the uneven ground, and picked it up. The call was still active. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The woman didn't answer immediately. There was a sound of someone typing on a keyboard on the other end. Fast, precise, professional. Then she spoke. You're safe for now, Elias, but you shouldn't have been at that diner. You were tracked from your apartment 3 blocks away. My blood turned to ice. How do you know my name? And who are you? That doesn't matter right now, she said. What matters is what's on your laptop. You need to look at the partition labeled Archive, the one you thought was corrupted. There's a file there that the organized group has been looking for 6 months. They didn't stop because they were bored, Elias. They stopped because I made them. But I can't keep doing this forever. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my mind reeling. I'm just a programmer. I don't have any secret files. You do, she said. And the reason they were so desperate to frame you with the packages is because they needed you to be in custody before the internal security team could get to your drive. Someone very powerful wants that data, and they've been using you as a living vault without you even knowing it. I stared at the laptop. It felt heavier now, a cursed object. How did it get there? Check your system logs, she commanded, and listen to me carefully. There is a car pulling into the diner right now. It isn't the bikers. It's the team that's actually behind the organized scheme. They don't want to talk, and they certainly don't want to threaten you. They've been ordered to silence the only person who can decrypt the drive. I looked up, and through the rain I saw a black SUV pull into the lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin predatory eyes. It didn't slow down. It accelerated directly toward me. Elias, the woman's voice became urgent. The drive in your laptop isn't just data. It's a blueprint, and if they get their hands on it, you won't just disappear. The truth will die with you. Run. Now. The SUV jumped the curb, smashing through a wooden fence and heading straight for my chair. I gripped the joystick, but as I turned to flee, my back wheel caught on a piece of debris and locked tight. I was spinning in place, the SUV bearing down on me, the engine a low, hungry growl. And then, from the passenger window of the oncoming vehicle, a dark, heavy shape emerged. It wasn't a hand. It was the barrel of an illegal weapon. The roar of the SUV's engine was deafening, a mechanical predator closing the distance. My breath hitched, trapped in my chest as the metal glinted in the headlights. The illegal weapon protruding from the window wasn't just a threat. It was a promise of finality. I jammed the joystick forward, but the wheel groaned, stuck against a jagged rock, spinning uselessly in the mud. I was a sitting duck, and the driver was lining me up with cold, surgical intent. Just as the SUV surged over the final patch of gravel, a sudden blinding flash erupted from the tree line. A flare, or perhaps something more technical, like a high-intensity blinding strobe, shattered the night, washing the parking lot in a disorienting, stark white light. The driver of the SUV jerked the wheel, the tires screaming as they lost traction on the wet pavement. The vehicle swerved violently, clipping a concrete bollard with a sickening crunch of steel and plastic. It spun, hydroplaning across the slick surface before slamming broadside into the diner's exterior wall. The impact sent a shockwave through the ground that rattled my teeth. I sat there, stunned, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. The SUV was tilted, its engine stalled, steam hissing from the shattered radiator. Elias, get out of there. The woman's voice was still pulsing through the phone, sharp and panicked. That's not the end of them. The passengers are trained operatives. They're getting out now. I didn't wait. I wrenched the joystick with every ounce of strength I had, and with a metallic crack, the wheel finally dislodged from the stone. I surged forward, weaving between the parked cars toward the back alley of the diner, my mind racing. Who were these people? And why was I, a freelance coder living a quiet life, suddenly at the center of a geopolitical firestorm? I ducked into the shadows of the alleyway, the rain soaking through my hoodie. I looked back just in time to see 2 figures emerge from the crumpled SUV. They didn't look like the bikers. They were dressed in tactical gear, moving with a fluid, lethal precision that made my skin crawl. They weren't looking for their fallen friends. They were scanning the lot, their eyes locked on the spot where I had been just seconds before. "He's in the alley," one of them rasped, his voice transmitted through a headset. I turned the corner, my chair buzzing as I pushed it to its maximum speed. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to put distance between myself and them. My phone vibrated in my lap. A text message appeared on the screen from an unknown number. Do not go home. Go to the abandoned terminal at the end of the harbor. There is a blue sedan with the keys in the visor. Leave your current phone behind. I looked at my laptop, then at the phone. My entire life was on that drive. The code I'd written, the archives I hadn't realized were there, the evidence of a deep-seated conspiracy. I pulled into a narrow service corridor, tucked my laptop into my bag, and dropped the phone into a deep puddle, watching it sink into the murky water. I felt a surge of terrifying freedom. I was truly off the grid now. I navigated the back streets, my chair bumping over curbs, until the scent of salt air told me I was nearing the harbor. The city was a maze of shadows, and every sound, a stray cat, the rattle of a trash can, the distant siren, felt like a hunter closing in. I reached the old terminal, a skeletal ruin of rusted shipping containers and decaying docks. There it was. A beat-up blue sedan sat parked under the flickering light of a broken street lamp. I approached it cautiously, my hands shaking. I reached up to the sun visor, and sure enough, a single key tumbled into my palm. I transferred myself into the driver's seat, feeling the cold leather beneath me, the scent of stale air and old secrets. As I turned the ignition, the engine sputtered to life, and the dashboard lights flickered on. I saw a GPS unit mounted to the dash, already displaying a route. It wasn't a map of the city. It was a digital map of the entire national security infrastructure, highlighting a specific, high-security facility located 3 hours away. Suddenly the car's radio static cleared, and a voice, not the woman's, but a man's, deep and gravelly, filled the cabin. You've made it this far, Elias, but you need to understand something. The woman who called you, she isn't your savior. She's the one who planted the data on your drive in the first place. I froze, my hand hovering over the gear shift. What? That's impossible. Nothing is impossible when you're a pawn in a game between two sides of the same internal security agency. The voice continued. Check the glove box. There's a file. If you open it, you'll see that the people hunting you and the woman guiding you are both working toward the same objective, using you as a scapegoat to trigger a massive systemic collapse. I reached over, my fingers trembling as I popped the latch. Inside was a thick manila folder labeled with my own name. I opened it, and my breath hitched. There, in high-resolution photographs, were pictures of me, not from tonight, but from months ago, at my desk, at the grocery store, sleeping in my bed. And in the background of every single photo was the same person, the woman who had just saved me. She hadn't been protecting me. She had been observing me, ensuring I remained the perfect vessel for the data. And the car I was sitting in? It wasn't an escape vehicle. It was a trap. I looked at the dashboard just as a red light on the GPS started blinking. A countdown had begun. 0059, 0058. The doors locked with a heavy final thud. I grabbed the handle, pulling, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped in a rolling cage, and the vehicle began to accelerate on its own, its wheels locking into a programmed path toward a destination I hadn't chosen. I looked at the GPS screen again, and the map zoomed out, showing a destination point that made my blood run cold. An active, high-security bridge rigged with explosive charges, and I was driving straight into the epicenter. The steering wheel jerked beneath my hands, moving of its own accord as if gripped by a phantom chauffeur. I slammed my palms against the glass, screaming at the locked doors, but the blue sedan didn't even shudder. It accelerated, the engine whining in a pitch that felt more like a mechanical scream than a combustion cycle. The streetlights overhead began to blur into a singular, elongated streak of sickly yellow. I realized with sickening clarity that this vehicle was being remotely piloted. Every system, from the throttle to the braking mechanism, had been hijacked. My mind raced, clawing for a solution, but the panic was a rising tide, drowning my ability to think clearly. Then I remembered the folder. I tore it open, desperate for anything. A override code, a schematic, a hint. Inside, beneath the photos of me, was a single, laminated card. It wasn't a document, it was an access key for a localized Wi-Fi mesh network, the kind used by the Service of Internal Security to bypass firewalls during field operations. My laptop. I lunged for my backpack, the sedan swerving violently as I moved, nearly clipping a concrete barrier. I ripped the device out, the screen glowing like a beacon in the darkened cabin. I frantically keyed in the credentials from the card, my fingers slipping on the keys. If the car was remote-controlled, it had to be receiving signals from somewhere close. A transmitter, a bridge, a repeater. If I could bridge into their connection, I might be able to inject a packet of noise into their stream. "Come on," I hissed, sweat stinging my eyes. The screen flickered, displaying a complex proprietary interface. I wasn't just a coder. I was a damn good one, and I had been building my own private server architecture for years, even if I hadn't realized its true purpose until tonight. I began to write a script, my pulse syncopated with the rapid-fire ticking of the dashboard clock. 0030, 0029, 0028. The sedan swung onto the approach of the bridge. The structure loomed ahead like the ribcage of some forgotten, metallic leviathan, its steel beams reaching into the fog. I could see the glow of warning lights at the far end, marking the area they'd cordoned off for the explosion. My code compiled. I hit enter just as the car swerved toward the center lane, where the structural supports were most exposed. The screen turned white, then flooded with a cascade of red text. Access granted. Remote override controller detected. I didn't hesitate. I pushed the kill signal command to the car's central processing unit. The engine instantly died. The power steering cut out, turning the wheel into a dead weight. The sedan jolted, the momentum carrying it forward, skidding across the rain-slicked bridge deck. Tires screeched, a terrifying, high-pitched sound that seemed to mock my struggle. I wrenched the steering wheel to the left, using every ounce of my upper body strength. The car fishtailed, its rear bumper clipping the guardrail with a shower of sparks that illuminated the dark water hundreds of feet below. The vehicle spun 360 degrees and came to a violent, jarring stop, dead in the middle of the bridge. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the engine cooling down. I was alive. I hadn't gone over the edge. I took a shuddering breath, my chest heaving. I looked out the windshield. The road ahead was blocked by a line of black tactical vans. The doors were swinging open, and armed men in dark uniforms poured out, their silhouettes framed by the high-intensity floodlights they'd set up on the bridge. My phone, the one I had thought I left in the puddle, suddenly buzzed in the pocket of my jacket. I froze. I hadn't dropped it. I had dropped a decoy. The woman had given me 2 phones that night, and I'd inadvertently kept the primary one. I answered, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. "You're resourceful, Elias," the woman's voice whispered, sounding closer than ever. "Far more than they anticipated. You've stopped the car, but you've also stopped the countdown. Do you know what happens when a rigged sequence is interrupted mid-cycle?" "I don't care," I choked out, watching the tactical team move toward me, weapons leveled. "I'm done. I'm stepping out. I'm surrendering." "If you step out of that car," she said, her voice turning ice cold, "the team waiting for you, the ones who believe you have the data, won't arrest you. They are not the Service of Internal Security. They are the group that was hired to ensure you never make it to trial. They've been waiting for this exact moment to claim you." I looked at the men approaching. They weren't wearing official insignias. Their gear was mismatched, professional, and terrifyingly efficient. They didn't have badges. They had kill lists. "Then what do I do?" I screamed. "They're 10 yards away." "Check the floorboard," she said. "Under the driver's seat. There's a compartment. Use what's inside, or die on this bridge." I scrambled, reaching under the seat, my fingers brushing against cold, hard metal. I pulled it out, not a weapon, but a small black remote detonator with a single blinking blue light. "What is this?" I whispered. "The explosives on the bridge weren't just for you," she said, her voice fading as if she were walking away from her own transmitter. "They were meant to wipe the slate clean for everyone on it. If you trigger the charge on the primary support beam, you won't blow up the bridge. You'll trigger the fail-safe fire suppression system. It will release a chemical foam that obscures everything within 50 feet. It's your only window." I looked at the detonator, then at the tactical team, who were now only 5 yards away, their boots heavy on the wet metal of the bridge. One of them raised a heavy, modified piece of illegal weaponry, aimed directly at my windshield. My thumb hovered over the button. The glass of the window began to spiderweb under the pressure of a flashlight being used as a battering ram. "Elias," she whispered, "do you want to be a pawn, or do you want to be the one who burns the board?" I looked at the detonator, then up at the face of the man staring through my windshield. He wasn't a lawman. He was an executioner. I pressed the button. The world didn't just explode. It vanished in a roar of white, suffocating mist. In the chaos, I felt a hand, not human, but a mechanical claw, reach through the shattered window, grab my collar, and yank me backward out of the car, slamming me onto the cold steel of the bridge, just as the sound of a dozen suppressed shots ripped through the air. The world became a suffocating, blinding wall of white. The chemical fire suppression foam filled the night, coating the bridge in a thick freezing shroud that smelled of ammonia and ozone. I was dragged across the cold metal of the deck, the mechanical claw, a high-tech remote-operated drone rig pulling me into the blind spot created by the mist. Gunfire hammered the spot where I had been sitting seconds before. The tactical operatives, now blinded by the wall of foam, began firing blindly into the white void, their shouts distorted and panicked. They were stumbling, hitting guardrails, and losing their formation in the sudden, man-made blizzard. "Don't move, Elias," a voice whispered from the darkness. Not from a phone, but from right beside me. I froze. Through the mist a figure materialized. It was a woman, tall and composed, wearing a matte black tactical vest. She held a device that pulsed with a rhythmic blue light, the source of the drone control. It was her. The woman from the phone. "Who are you?" I wheezed, my lungs burning from the foam. "I am the one who ensures the truth survives," she replied, her voice devoid of any warmth, yet strangely reassuring. "The men attacking you were part of a rogue faction within the Service of Internal Security. They were never trying to arrest you. They were trying to liquidate you to keep their organized scheme, the one you unknowingly decrypted, from reaching the public light." She reached out and snatched my laptop from the seat of the abandoned sedan. As she did, the sound of heavy, rhythmic thuds echoed from the far end of the bridge. It wasn't the sound of more attackers. It was the synchronized cadence of boots. A lot of them. "That's the real Service of Internal Security," she said, checking her watch. "The genuine ones. They've been tracking our location for the last 10 minutes. When they arrive, you are to give them this." She thrust a small, encrypted drive into my hand. "It contains the real evidence. The data on your laptop was just the decoy, a honeypot designed to draw out the rogue elements. You were the bait, Elias, but you were also the only person smart enough to survive the hook." "You used me," I said, the realization finally anchoring in my chest. "I protected you," she corrected, her eyes scanning the mist. "Without me, you would have been discarded the moment the bikers realized they couldn't control you. Now take this. When the light turns green on the display, walk toward the center of the bridge. They won't shoot." The mist began to dissipate as the wind picked up. The rogue operatives, seeing the flashing blue and red lights approaching from the city side, scattered like roaches, throwing their weapons over the edge of the bridge and vanishing into the shadows of the harbor piers. The woman stepped back into the darkness. "Wait, what about you?" I called out, but she was already fading, a shadow among shadows. The heavy boots reached us. I stood, my legs shaking, holding the drive out in front of me like a holy relic. A team of agents in standard, recognizable tactical gear surged forward. They didn't point weapons. They surrounded me, their faces grim but controlled. One of them, a man with graying temples and a look of weary professional, stepped forward. "Elias Vance?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. I handed him the drive. He didn't open it. He simply signaled his team. "Secure him and move fast. We've got a lot of arrests to make tonight." 3 months later, the city felt different. The news was filled with headlines of massive arrests, the dismantling of a corrupt network that had bled the local infrastructure dry, and the exposure of the rogue faction that had tried to turn the bridge into a graveyard. My name was never in the papers. To the public, I was just a victim of a random crime who had slipped back into the obscurity of his own life. I sat in a small cafe, the sun warming the table. I was back to coding, but my projects were different now, more secure, more private. My phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. "The board is clear for now, Elias. Keep it that way." I looked up, scanning the crowded street. I saw a woman in a gray coat standing across the plaza, her back to me. She was watching the flow of traffic, a silent guardian in the light of day. As I watched, she turned her head just for a fraction of a second. There was no smile, no sign of recognition, just a sharp, knowing nod before she stepped into the crowd and vanished. I looked down at my coffee and smiled, taking a slow sip. I wasn't a pawn anymore, and I wasn't a victim. I was the person who had held the match that burned the board down, and for the first time in 3 years I felt like I was actually in control of my own life. I opened my laptop, cleared the cache, and began to type. The story was over, but my work, my real work, was only just beginning.